I'm Dr. Robert Moore, and I want to say welcome to our Build a Better Brain seminar. And today we're going to talk about the temporal lobe. I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. There is a lot more information about your temporal lobe than I'm going to give you today. So just please be aware of that. We talked about the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, and the temporal lobe. We even talked about how the parietal lobe and the occipital lobe and the temporal lobe all came together last week to talk about how when you hear things, we see things, and we feel things, they put together so we can associate those things. So your temporal lobe, a very big function of your temporal lobe is hearing. So you have your primary auditory cortex. And what this does, it allows you to consciously be aware of sound. So that could be sound of a bang, that could be someone saying something, but that is where you are consciously aware of sound. Remember I said that the primary sensory cortex was consciously aware of light, touch, vibration? Well, you need to be aware of sound. So where there's a primary cortex, there is an association cortex. Some people like to call it the secondary association cortex. So you have your association auditory cortex. So you've heard a sound, you're consciously aware of the sound. That's great. But what do you do with that? You need to know what that sound is. That was somebody banging their hand on the table. That was somebody calling out your name. And you need to know, and then you need to remember that sound. The sound of a nice music. The sound of an explosion. So you need to remember that sound too. So you need to figure out what that sound is, analyze that sound, remember that sound, and figure out what it is you're dealing with. So then you can respond through the prefrontal cortex and the primary motor cortex. You can respond to that sound appropriately. You also have, and it's deeper in the temporal lobe. Here's your temporal lobe here. So we go a little deeper inside. You don't really see it from the outside. You go a little deeper inside. That's why this is dotted. You have your olfactory, primary and association olfactory sensation cortex. And then right below your frontal lobe, and I drew this in this week, is something called your olfactory bulb. And that's where you actually smell stuff. So when you stimulate your olfactory bulb, it sends the information to the primary olfactory cortex, inside in here. Now, that's going to tell you that you're smelling something. And it's nice to know that you're smelling something. So like these flowers, it's springtime in Michigan, so the flowers, you like to smell the flowers. So, and when you smell that, you're consciously aware that you're smelling something. Again, there's a secondary association cortex that goes with this to tell you, what are you smelling? And the nice thing about smell, and this will ring true to most people, is when you smell something, you may actually get an emotion involved with that smell. So your secondary association cortex, your association cortex, olfactory association cortex, actually is linked to your limbic system. So that smell, that's how my grandma smelled. And you smile. That's how grandma's house smelled. Oh, that's how the bathroom at school smelled, like chlorine. Ugh. You remember those smells. You can associate those smells. It's great because you will learn, that's a bad smell. Get away from it. That's a good smell. Let's enjoy that. When I smell the lilacs outside, it reminds me when I was in college and I would study outside, and every time I smell a lilac, it makes me smile. I just love it. And that's because it associates that and it puts it into my memory. Now, there's also something, this black spot here, that is Werners Area. Now that is an area for comprehension of speech, of language that is written or heard. That's how you comprehend things. When I say, my ideas quedan justas day, you heard it, you associate with, well, he's saying something, I don't understand that, and you don't comprehend it because you don't speak the language. But when I talk here, and I'm talking about Werners Area, and I say this is for comprehension, you can at least comprehend that. And so what that allows you to do is to have a conversation with somebody. For instance, we'll take a husband and a wife. The husband comes home, and the wife says these 3 words. He says, "How you doing?" And the wife says 2 words, "I'm fine." Now, those can be spoken, "I'm fine." Like, hey, she's doing good. Or, "I'm fine," where she's not doing so good. Or, "I'm fine," where, maybe you don't want to talk to her anymore, kind of leave her alone for a little bit. But that is that tone, that vibration that you hear, the pitch, sound, that's the job of these 2 guys here. But the comprehension of what it means is Werners. And Werners we'll talk with Broca's. Remember we talked about Broca's in the frontal lobe? That is my ability to say the word. Werners is to make it so that those words are, so that you can understand them. If you've ever run across somebody that's had a stroke, there's 2 things you can look for. We always know what Broca's here. Because they cannot coordinate the muscles of language. Werners, they have a stroke in this area, then they just talk about flowers and the janitor and the tricycle and the motorcycle and the mountains and the glasses. They make no sense. You can understand what they're saying because they can physically say the word, but their comprehension is off. You tell this person, "All right, why don't you touch your nose?" And they'll say, "Well, the nurse at the school with the red purse and the purple flower," they just go off on a tangent. There's no comprehension there. That's how you can tell your problem with Werners area. And these 2 areas talk to each other. And it's called the arcuate fiber, arcuate lemniscus. And so that's a whole other story. That's a little too deep. Now, we said that the olfactory association cortex was inside the temporal lobe. There's also another area that's not drawn on here. And if we take this and we flip it up, and we look inside, there's something called the insular cortex. Now your insular cortex also combines with the parietal lobe and occipital lobe, but it's really what I like to call personally, what makes sense to me is it takes information from my viscera, like I eat a food and it makes me upset, and I feel that pain, I feel that in the insular cortex. But I also remember, don't eat that again, because that made you feel horrible. Also, it has to do with my balance center, my sense of equilibrium. Some people call it the parietal insular vestibular cortex. That's where it comes in there. And so that is mostly on people's right side. That is for balance and equilibrium. And also my sense of taste. All my taste buds will go into from my tongue, all the different tastes, salty, sweet, bitter, umami, which is like protein for like monosodium glutamate, highly sensory. They'll go in through and they'll go to the nucleus tractus solitarius, my brainstem, but they'll go up into the insular cortex, and I can associate those tastes with things and remember those. So I remember don't eat these foods because my stomach hurts. My stomach told me that. I remember all kinds of different things, and it has to do with balance and equilibrium. So your temporal lobe has a lot to do with a lot of things. But if you primarily learn hearing, smell, and taste, that'd be great. Now there's also other areas in through there. There is your hippocampus for short-term memory and spatial awareness, but that's for other subjects. So, a great exercise for your temporal lobe. Let's go through that. A great exercise for your temporal lobe is just to smell something. This is an essential oil, it's peppermint. and I want to stimulate my left temporal lobe. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close my right nostril, and I'm just going to breathe. And there's different you can talk to somebody and they'll say different smells for different things. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to smell something. So smell something you like. I like peppermint. And that just smells great. And so that stimulates my left temporal lobe. You can stimulate your right temporal lobe by covering up your nostril and just breathing. You don't have to sniff. You don't have to snort it. You don't have to go crazy with it. But that will stimulate your temporal lobe. And as always, the best thing to do is to start doing something. So I want to thank you for participating in our Build a Better Brain workshop. I'm Dr. Robert Moore. Please like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any questions, call our office at 810-374-0304. Send us a text on how well you like these videos and what you think we can do to improve upon them. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Thank you, and God bless you.